Welcome back to Fire to Fork. Tonight we are finally doing what I've been promising I'd do forever, and we're going to cook some winter warmers, even though it's February. I think it'll be March by the time this comes out, so it's not as bad. But the idea here is cheap food, tasty food, hearty food, all in a camp oven, kind of not quite a one-pot wonder, but pretty bloody close. So let's get cracking. First thing we need to do is get, actually, before I do get cracking, don't forget, somewhere in this episode there is a code word. It's going to come up on the screen. Comment that code word down below on YouTube to win a copy of my book. Right, start off with some oil. About 3 tablespoons of oil, and we're going to start with some onions. Nothing in this dish needs to be finely chopped or anything special. This is a real just like chop it up, chuck it in, enjoy it. I think after crispy pork, this has been my most requested episode, and I just wanted to get it right. So I've got this old beef casserole recipe that my mum gave me, which I know is killer. So that's what we're making. I use a spun steel camp oven because they're 75% lighter than normal camp ovens. If you drop them, they don't crack, they bend, all that kind of stuff. I just generally find them to be a better unit. Only downside of them is they're slightly harder to season. I bought this one, my own money, I'm not being paid to say this. I just really like them. It's a Southern Metal Spinners 10-inch. And I think with a 10-inch, honestly, you can feed probably 6 people with the smaller model, the 10-inch model. And the 12-inch is more for like, you need to have a seriously big family to justify that, or to cook for a lot of people, or have some sort of commercial operation. The 10 is tons for the vast majority of people. I've never found it limiting. All right, onion in, and I might just start by frying that up. All right, so we'll just fry these for a few seconds until they get translucent, and then we're going to add some more stuff. All right, these are looking a bit more fried up, so I'm just going to chuck in some bits of carrot. So that's 2 sort of small carrots. Next we go some button mushrooms, because I love mushrooms. You can actually use like a tin of mushrooms for this. It works really well. In fact, you can use pretty much mostly tinned ingredients for a stew if you are remote traveling, and I do recommend it. It all works pretty well. The only thing that doesn't actually work very well, sometimes doesn't work very well, dehydrated orange vegetables. Don't recommend them, or freeze-dried orange vegetables. They get this weird taste after not very long, and yeah, they taste like petrol. It's very full on. So yeah, other than that, everything else, freeze-dried, dehydrated, whatever, great. And I think we'll throw in our tinned tomatoes. This is the equivalent of 2 tins of tinned tomatoes. I like the Australian grown ones. A bit of salt and pepper, and a beer. You don't have to use beer. If you do use beer, I recommend a dark beer, like a Guinness or a porter or a stout or something like that. I'm using a CB Co porter because it's what I have. You can also use red wine or white wine. Yeah, there are lots of different options. I wouldn't, like a lager or something, a standard like an export or something is not going to do that well, but any kind of a flavourful booze is a good one. If you don't drink booze, you don't have booze with you, use beef stock. All right, let's chuck this stuff in. Change my mind a little bit here. I think we should fry up some beef before it gets all juicy. So let's quickly get this beef. So we've got 1 kilo of cheap casserole beef, which is usually like, what's this one? Chuck steak, a bit of rump, something like that. This is the cheapest beef you can pretty much find. Other than, you might be able to get minced cheaper, but that's about it. All of this steak is worth about, I don't know, $10 or something, and it's going to it'll feed 4 comfortably. So you want sort of chunks like that. Maybe, no, you can probably go half that, like that. And the smaller you do the chunks, generally the faster you can make this. I'm not saying cut it up fine if you're in a rush. I'm saying just, if you have 2 hours, do it bigger. If you have 1 hour, do it a little bit smaller. We've had a huge day. We've been down at Bornham Beach, which is a very difficult beach to get off, filming a bit of stuff. It won't be a YouTube episode, but it will be on my Instagram. You can look forward to that on the other socials. Okay, I'll quickly fry up this beef. I'm going to start with just quickly salt and peppering it before it goes in. Now, I actually overcooked the onions a little bit in there. That's okay. It'll survive. It's a stew. Who really cares? All the flavours will just get to know each other and become one nice flavour, hopefully, in theory. Now the next component is completely optional. You do not have to bring it. If you have it, use it. That is a bit of yum yum, which is also known as MSG, just because MSG makes everything better. All right, that's sort of starting to brown up a little bit. There are still some raw bits, but that is totally fine because that is not the sort of end result we're going for. This is going to cook for ages. All I wanted to do is sort of seal it a little bit to keep some of the moisture in. So to that we add mushrooms, the tin of tomatoes, and importantly, the dark beer. I wouldn't actually usually use a Colonial, or sorry, a CVco on one of my meals. I usually buy something cheaper and worse. But, you know, put the good stuff in, you'll get the good stuff out. Cool thing about stews is they don't need any top heat, which is very unlike pretty much every other camp oven meal you can get. Well, bang a lid on it. Yes, my lid's very rusty. And yes, I will fix that later, but for now, it'll be just fine. And we'll let it simmer for probably 45 minutes to an hour. So while all that's going on, we want to do some mashed potatoes. The quickest way to do mashed potatoes, and probably the easiest for the bush, you get your potato and you chop it up quite small. That's just going to allow it to cook faster and break up easier. Bit of salt, and then chuck on the fire. Chuck it on, we want to get it to boil. We're probably going to boil that for about something like sort of half an hour, that kind of thing. We want to boil the hell out of it. We want the potato to actually be falling apart by the time we take that off. Alrighty, let's make some mashed potatoes. So, drain this off. Now the way I tested these is basically just got a fork, poked it in one, and it fell apart. That means it's ready to be mashed. I mean, you can see there if I stir it, it just starts to immediately mash. But I'm going to add the good stuff. I usually wouldn't get a spreadable butter for this particular task. I'd use a normal butter, but we caught some marron and ate them with all the other butter, so that's what we've got. So I'm going to use a lot of butter, like probably 150 grams of butter. You can use oil or Nuttelex or something like that if you're vegan. And as usual, all the ingredients, all the exact like measurements and everything, the ingredients, the directions, everything, the entire recipe is in the video description below. Here's a bit of salt. Texture's, I'd say 90% of the way there. A little bit lumpy, not an issue. It's the bush. Good mashed potatoes with very minimal tools. Let's go and check on that stew. Been on for about 40 minutes. Yeah, so the thing you're looking for is tender steak, and that is not that at all. That is chewy as anything. So, chuck it back on. The steak will basically go from being raw, very, very tight, very, very hard, chewy, awful, and then release. And that can take about sort of an hour to an hour and a half. Put it back on, take our time, have a beer. So, I said initially it'd be like 45 minutes to an hour. It was not. It was neither of those things. It wasn't even in the same ballpark as that. It has been about 3 hours, and it's finally tender. So I took the time, I did one of those camp meals that every single person can relate to, which is just taking way too bloody long to cook food. So let's serve it up. I don't know if you know it's worth doing gratuitous B-roll because it's... In fact, I'm not going to do a gratuitous B-roll because this is not a gratuitous B-roll kind of meal. Yeah, I'm just going to serve it up. Let's do it. Stained plate with mashed potatoes, which actually do smell great. Bit of mash, bit of stew. Gee, what a surprise. Harry having technical problems. So at this stage, my lav mic had run out of batteries and I wasn't getting any audio. So called Ryan over to have a try, which he did. I'll do my my best reenactment of this thing that I filmed 3 weeks ago and what it tasted like. Yum, 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 chewy, chewy, chewy. It actually wasn't chewy at all. It was really tender. Look, it is a very simple, hearty stew. It does exactly what it says in the packet. It's delicious. It's a bit salty. It's a bit beefy. And I think the beer works really well for it. But if you did want a different sort of more rich and tangy flavour, a bit of red wine would go really well in that. Ryan ate that entire plate and then 2 more of those entire plates. I haven't seen. He said it was the best thing that I've ever made for him. So, yeah, it was an absolutely ripper result. Very, very, very simple. And thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers. Also, don't forget to comment the code word.